First of all, can I just ask you about the news about the Albion players launching their As One charity, and what your reaction is to that and what it says about the club right now?
We're delighted. I mean, it's entirely the players' idea. Obviously, they've already made their support for Players Together public, which is also great. This was much more something they wanted to do to focus on local charities and local good causes. And Glenn Murray and Lewis Dunk approached me with the idea and invited the club to participate, which we're doing. And we're delighted to do so. So we're going to be opening it up for our staff and fans to take part in it as well. So a very, very good and very kind initiative by the players.
Graham, what do you think of the gesture?
I echo what Paul said. Proud of them for doing it. I'm not surprised. Like I said before, they had another initiative. Made some donations, I think, privately before these discussions. So I knew that they were aware of their responsibilities and their place in the community. I know that they're very grateful for the support they have from the community, and it's a great time to give back.
Paul, when I was on a web call with you a few weeks ago, you were waiting for the players to have a position on wages, on deferrals or wage cuts. Are there any closer to being on a position for that? And can you kind of comment on that at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we've still got our talks going. Glenn Murray and I spoke again last night and updated each other on where we were. We agreed that we wanted to get Albion As One launched first. Because there's a significant contribution the players have made from their April wage packets towards that, which is fantastic. And so we'll pick up those discussions literally in the next week or so. One of the things we've been very clear on and we agreed on from the start was that we wanted to make sure that Glenn and Lewis had as much time as they needed to talk to every member of the squad. We felt it was very important that each member of the squad were involved in the discussions, had an opportunity to ask as many questions as they felt necessary. And Glenn has come back once or twice in the last few days to clarify certain things, which we've provided. And now we've just left it again with Glenn and Lewis to take forward.
Can you give us some sense on how they feel about this, Paul?
I think that, first of all, they fully understand the financial position that not just the club, but the football industry as a whole is in. They understand that without matches going ahead, match day income, which is important to Premier League clubs as well as all clubs, is not happening. They also understand that, although our income has stopped pretty much overnight, our costs have rolled on regardless. And therefore there's a gap. And we had projected to lose quite a considerable sum of money this year. We budgeted to do that. We knew what we were doing with that. And we had the chairman's support to do that. But this particular crisis is going to mean that loss, that deficit, is going to be much, much greater if we don't play games in front of fans, or even if we do play games behind closed doors. We're still going to have a very significant deficit that we weren't anticipating. We've asked the players for help with that. We've also advised them that we may need to ask our own staff, non-playing staff, for support with that. And we've also been very transparent with our staff about that. So the players have got a complete picture. And obviously now I think it's important that we leave them to digest that. And I think the key to this, Jeremy, is that we remain patient. As I've said all along, the players' contracts are guaranteed. Anything that they do is going to be a gesture on their part to help the club. And therefore it makes absolute sense for us to leave them to mull that over and to give them as much time as they need, because we're not in a great position here to negotiate. We don't have anything to negotiate with. Their contracts are guaranteed. So all we can do is to show them the position that we're in, the difficulty and the challenges, and then leave it to what is a very, very good group of players who've been excellent all the way through this process.
Obviously, though, Paul, West Ham, Watford and Southampton and Arsenal making their positions clear now. When do you think a Brighton position on this is going to become obvious?
I'd rather give them as much time as they need to get to the best possible outcome, rather than rush them, put them under pressure, put their backs against the wall, which is not fair. I think it's right to give them as much time as they need. They know, as I said, our financial position, and they know the pressures that we're suffering. So I don't want to put a date on it, Jeremy, or a time on it. But what I can say is they've been incredibly supportive very constructive and very positive all the way through.
Graham, I guess you're talking to your players. I mean, how do you think they're dealing with lockdown? And can you talk about the mental challenges of being, you know, away from the group and having to train alone and deal with this situation, you know, in isolation, really?
Yeah, I spoke to pretty much all of them this week. Generally, their spirits are good. They know the situation. They know the bigger picture. Of course, they're frustrated. They want to, like everybody else, they want this thing to go away. They want to get back to normal. They don't like the uncertainty of not knowing when the potential start may be. But at the same time, they're intelligent enough to know that we're in a very, very serious position where people are dying. There's a lot of unfairness around in terms of how that is affecting people's lives. So they know the big picture, but at the same time, yeah, they're probably frustrated and concerned, just like pretty much everybody is.
Would you say they're finding it mentally challenging in any way?
I think it has been a challenge. Yeah, I think it's a big challenge for all of us because we're in a situation for the good of the country that we have to give up our liberties. We can only go out when we're exercising for an hour and all that sort of stuff. So everybody is challenged in that situation, and footballers are no different. They're not doing what they want to do. They're not doing their jobs. They don't know when they'll start. But that's the same as pretty much everybody else in the country as well. I'm sure if you ask everybody, small businesses, restaurant owners, etc., they're all the same. But they're doing it well. They've got, like I said, they've got the bigger picture. And while it's a challenge, it's one that they're taking as best they can.
A question to both of you as well about the resumption of the season, because the chief medical officer was saying yesterday that in his view, social distancing could be in place for the rest of the year. If that were the case, it's hard to see any fans in the AMEX for games, maybe for the rest of the season. I mean, do you have a view on, when fans are going to be ever seeing football at the AMEX again, given what was said by Chris Whitty yesterday?
No, not at the moment, Jez. I mean, we haven't had a home game, I think I'm right in saying, since February 29th. So it's a really long time since we had football at the AMEX. And obviously what we've said all along is that we simply must follow the government's guidelines, the government's policies. We can only really return to play when it's safe to do so. And it's not just safe for spectators, because we're almost certainly not going to have any spectators for a while, but it's got to be safe for the players and the staff as well. So, we're very much in the government's hands on that particular point. And, we obviously want to finish the season. We want to play. Players are desperate to play. We all want to see football back on our television screens, even if it means not having fans in the stadium. It's not going to be ideal for sure. That's not the way we want to play top-level football in the Premier League. But the situation, as Graham said, is very serious. People are losing their lives. People are losing their jobs. People are really, really suffering at the moment. And we've got to be and we've got to remain very cognizant of that.
Graham, when do you think there has to be a cut-off point for the season, really? I mean, when do you think football has to be back on in any shape or form to get the season finished?
It's an impossible one to answer, Jeremy, to be honest. Like Paul said, you can almost talk it in two levels, can't you? So when football has to go back on, or when it's safe to do so on a human level, and that's what we don't know, and that's the government to decide that, and we're as footballers there to try to support that. But in terms of when, that's up to the government, and that's up to the authorities to decide, I would say.
Just one last question to both of you, if I may. Damien Comoli was telling us at the weekend that he thought when the transfer window does reopen, only 3 clubs will be spending money because the market's going to be so skewed and so suppressed. Paul, do you think there's anything in that kind of assertion that only 3 clubs, maybe a couple of clubs, might be spending any serious money?
Well, I think it's logical to think that the transfer window is definitely going to be very different this time around. I don't know whether Damien's view of 3 clubs is right or wrong, but it's certainly going to be very different. And it might be different, I would suggest, for a couple of windows, because, we're all, as we said earlier, we're all struggling at the moment with our income levels significantly dropped during this period. So, it's definitely going to be a very different transfer window, I think.
And I just wanted to ask as well about, you've been speaking to fans. I think over 2,000 fans have been contacted by the club. I mean, including yourself, Paul, on the calls, and Tony as well. How's that been going, and how much more of that do you want to do?
Yeah, it's been really good, actually. I spoke to an 85-year-old lady this morning who apologised for not answering the phone very quickly because she was in her garden and she had to make it back to the phone. But she was lovely. She was a season ticket holder in our Lower West stand, and she's been coming to watch our matches for over 70 years. So it's very rewarding to talk to people who've supported the club for that long, who are a little bit lonely at the moment. They're a bit isolated, but it's been really, really uplifting for me personally to do that. I've actually enjoyed that in this lockdown period almost more than anything else. It's been really valuable thing to do.
And Graham, just finally from me, what have you been doing in lockdown? How have you been spending your time?
Yeah, pretty much the same as when we spoke previously. Bit of juggling with the kids, bit of homeschool is back now, preparing for the restart, speaking to the players, communicating with the members of the staff in terms of around the club, with the academy, having an eye on recruitment ideas. So just a general busy, but not doing the stuff that we, of course, would like to do, which is be out on the training pitch playing football.
Paul, I'll come to you first. You must feel an overwhelming sense of pride with everything that the club is doing at the moment.
Yeah, very, very proud of what all of the staff are doing. The players obviously have set a fantastic example today with their initiative to launch the charity fund, and the staff themselves. The 2,500 calls certainly haven't been made by me. I've done a small number, but we've got some staff that have done over 150 calls to elderly, infirm and vulnerable people. And we're now just starting the second wave of those calls. So I would imagine by the time this crisis is over, we would have made literally thousands of calls to our fans. And in a way, it probably sets a new benchmark for us to make sure that we carry on doing similar things even when this crisis is over, because the value of the calls has been fantastic. But we're very proud of opening the COVID-19 test centre at the AMEX. That's going really well. As Paul said, a bit later on, we're launching another scheme with Albion in the community to get meals out to vulnerable people in the community as well. But I think that's what football clubs need and should do in times of crisis. They're the hubs of their own communities, and for so long, clubs have had these schemes running with their local community, whether it's education or health education or supporting vulnerable people or getting into some of the poorer areas to coach football. And now, in a crisis, we can really show how valuable those schemes are and those connections are. So very proud of what we're doing, and I know that lots of other football clubs up and down the country are doing similar things.
Yeah, just on the charity scheme that's been launched today, whose actual idea was it? Was it a combination of Lewis and Glenn, or was it someone else?
No, I think Lewis and Glenn have led it, and I think they were very determined that in addition to the contributions they made a little while ago, as Graham mentioned earlier, they wanted to set up a fund that the club and supporters and staff could join in with to basically look after local charities. A lot of charities at the moment, for obvious reasons, are struggling to raise the kind of money that they would normally raise. And a lot of charities are actually, having even more pressure on them because of whatever they do is supporting the community. The community needs them more than ever. So I think Lewis and Glenn felt that, we could do something to put some of the money that they're losing out on in this particular period back into their charities and help them as best we could. The players have made a very substantial donation. The chairman's been very generous in topping that up. Some of the other directors are also supporting it, and I suspect a lot of the staff and fans who have been asking us whether they could contribute in some way will contribute to it as well. So I suspect we could end up with quite a substantial sum of money to distribute.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks, Paul. Graham, if I can move on to you. Glenn Murray's just posted a picture of his lunch. So my question is nutrition. How are the players making sure they eat the right things? Are they cooking for themselves? Are you guys helping them out with food deliveries, that kind of thing?
What was his lunch?
Something he said. Thanks, Gary Lineker on it for some reason. So it's for whatever reason.
I hope it wasn't a packet of crisps then.
no packet of crisps.
No, but they get well supported by our staff. Fantastic sports science department that advise them around what to eat, when to eat. I have a bit of a joke with Ali Razor, he's got his mom living with him at the moment, and I just need to remind him not to eat too much of his mother's nice Persian food. It could pile on the calories a bit quickly. So yeah, but they're professional. They know, and they've got the club there to support them if they have any questions.
Are you changing their training plans week to week? So they've got a variety of things to do rather than just, I don't know, going on the bike or whatever?
No, exactly. I think that's been the challenge, and that's been stuff that we've been in constant communication with them around. Okay, how can they exercise? What's the right way to do that? It's a challenge because if you're going out running, I go out for a run myself. You bobbing and weaving in amongst people sometimes from a social distance perspective.
Yeah.
So finding the right time and the right areas and facilities to work with is a challenge for them, but that's what we've got to do. That's the job. They've taken on all the advice, and they're doing as best they can, and the program's varied, so we're sort of happy with that.
How much has your job changed? I know it's a kind of simple question, but how much has your job changed?
Well, yeah, on a purely fundamental level, it's changed enormously, because the job is essentially to be working with players on the grass, preparing a team to play football against another team, and that's just not happening. So it's a massive change. At the same time, you have to adapt. You have to work in different ways, still communicate with the players, still communicate with the staff, still prepare, still analyse. So in that way, it's similar, but it's still different in terms of even just this is on my lounge speaking to you rather than being at the training ground.
Can you do any tactical work with your players? Yeah,
you can. I mean, there's you can put them into small groups. You can do big groups. There's facilities out there that you can have meetings. So that's anything is possible. There's no excuses in that regard. It's the value of it, the timing of it, and what you're aiming to get out of it. But certainly, if you're talking about tactically on the pitch and how they respond to different situations, maybe not. But from a theoretical perspective, to go over some principles that you've been working with, yeah, that's possible.
And just one more thing on the training side of things, how does it differ for the goalkeepers? Do the goalkeepers find it harder to practice? I've seen a couple of videos of goalkeepers in their gardens throwing balls against walls and things like that. Is that what Matty Ryan and the other guys are doing? How do they train?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're all training. I think it's pretty. Everyone's in the same boat, I would say, in terms of the fundamentals of their job. If you're right back, there's no defense, there's no winger running at you, there's no passing to different players that you can do. Same as a goalkeeper. We've lost that bit of our work, so we just have to work individually on our own, work on our condition, our physical preparation, and then the football stuff we're going to have to wait until we get a more a better time to do it.
Just finally, Graham, just throwing it back to what I asked Paul at the very start, just how proud of the club are you, all the staff that you work with, the fans, the NHS staff in the town, all that kind of thing. How proud are you?
No, it's been amazing. As someone new to the city, I've been taken aback by how everybody has adapted, how everybody has taken on this challenge. The club, the people at the club have been amazing. Everyone's trying their best to look at it as positive way as we can in a really tragic situation, which ultimately this virus is. Try to be together, try to pull together. It's been amazing.
Graham, can I start with you? When we last spoke, you said that if there were 48 hours in a day as a manager, then you could use them. So what have you been focusing on in particular?
It's been quite varied, to be honest. We went through a process initially of reviewing all the matches, reviewing all our games, reviewing the individual performances of the players. We go from that to maybe more globally looking at how we're playing, what the strengths and the weaknesses that we've been doing. So a real thorough evaluation of what's happened. And then we're looking at, okay, how can we use the time to maybe prepare going forward. So dialogue with the academy, dialogue with our under-23s, dialogue with our recruitment, thinking about the future, but also always second guessing what the future looks like and when it's going to start again. So I would say they're the main things.
And how much have you thought about recruitment? Because Dan Ashworth spoke to us a few weeks ago and said that the club are now working on a third scenario whereby the club neither get relegated or stay up, but in case they lose tens of millions of pounds.
Yeah, I think it's more, not necessarily, it's more speaking about it in general, with always a caveat that we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when the season's going to start. We don't know the outcome yet. We don't know what next season's going to look like, when it's going to start, what the transfer window is going to, etc., etc. So there's so many things up in the air at the moment that it's more just on a general level. Recruitment ideas, recruitment possibilities, in discussion with, of course, what we've got already in the building. Hence the conversations with the academy, within the 23s, to try and join everything up, gain as much information as possible, because ultimately the more information you have about your club, the more you're able to make the right decision when that time is.
Can you give me an idea of how much training plans have adapted over the last few weeks, and what dates are you now working on to get the players up to speed, or when you think you may potentially be able to have the players back on the training pitch?
Again, we're not sure. I think we started off when the country went into lockdown. There's quite a big psychological effect that has on the players, because it's the first time that essentially the civil liberties have been taken away in terms of not being able to go out and deal with life in a normal way. So, yeah, the main focus is trying to keep everybody together, an element of normality, an element of structure to their work, psychologically check everybody's all right. And then once you go from that stage, it's about, okay, we decided that as things were getting pushed back more and more, it might be wise for guys to, spend some time with their family if they can overseas, and if it's safe to do so, just for their own mental well-being. So then it became a bit more optional, I would say, a bit more, we can use the training plans if it suits the individual. And we're moving more towards now, everything's been ramped up a little bit more, I'd say, a bit more combination of running, a bit more combination of going out. Because initially players were concerned with even going out and exercising outside. So now it's probably more running around. And now the challenge is they're running around and they're on Hove Park and people are dodging each other, and it's not so easy to keep a social distance because everyone seems to be out for that hour. So there are different challenges that we have to try to overcome, but we're getting there.
We've seen some Premier League players have been flouting some of the government guidelines. Have you had to reiterate just how important it is for the players to stay at home, and if they do go out, to be socially distancing as well?
Yeah, that's the point. I go out for a run and I try to keep a social distance, but sometimes it's not easy because there's people out there doing the same thing. So you're sort of playing dodging and weaving around. I'm sure if people took a picture of me at times, I look like I'm too close to people. That's because I'm too slow and they're too quick, maybe. But no, they know that they're conscious of their responsibilities. We speak to them a lot, but it's something we want to try to help them with.
And just finally, Ben White gained quite a lot of attention earlier this week. A 5-year-old fan from Leeds wants him to stay at the club, and he's willing to offer £15 for him to do so. Have you thought about how you may use Ben next season? Are you expecting him to be a big part of your plans?
Yeah, absolutely. He's been part of the discussions. We're aware of how well he's done. We're aware of his qualities. We would have signed him, as I said before, we would have signed him if we're still at our previous club. So we're aware of the journey he's been on, and it's been a fantastic journey in terms of his loan experiences, and he's had a wonderful time at Leeds. And at the same time as we're aware of where his future may be, he's still got the season to finish with Leeds. He's still got a job and complete that loan spell, and then we see from there. Thanks, Graham. No problem.
Paul, can I ask you about Oliver Dowden's comments yesterday about games potentially being made available on pay-per-view TV? How realistic do you think that would be? And would that be a good thing for Brighton from a sponsor's point of view, seeing their sponsors that more fans are going to see the shirt sponsors, for instance?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's really something the league is in discussion with. So I don't really want to get into the detail because I'm not privy to the discussion they've had with the minister. But certainly, if we're playing behind closed doors, then obviously we would want as many fans as possible to see our games. That's for sure. That would also potentially, if it came at the right time, give a little lift to people. If they got an opportunity to see some live sport again after such a long time, that may well be a positive. But as we said before, that can only happen when it's safe for everybody, and when the government give us that opportunity to do so. But I think also we've got to be mindful that the largest part of our income, certainly in the Premier League, comes from our broadcast partners. So I would expect the Premier League will make sure that our main broadcast partners in the UK and of course overseas as well are properly protected. Should the rights to games be extended beyond the normal partners. But that's something very much for the league, and I'll leave them to that.
And how have conversations been going with your own main sponsors?
Very well, actually. I mean, we're in constant communication with American Express, who are our main partner for our shirt, our stadium, and our training ground and charity as well. So they're very important to us. Obviously, Nike, very important as well as our technical partner. But we've also got dozens and dozens of local sponsors that support the club and have supported the club for many, many years. And a lot of those companies obviously are suffering during this very difficult period as well. So we're very mindful of doing what we can to give them as much support as we can. The players have been great. Graham and the coaching staff have supported us on various things to keep them engaged, keep them involved with the club. And I think sometimes, it's just reaching out to them is as important as anything. They just want to know that the club still cares and values them as much as we would if we were playing games normally. So very, very pleased with the support we've had. And obviously we want to try and return that as best we can during this period.
In terms of players who are out of contracts on the 30th of June, have the club had any conversations with them at all? Because it looks like you may need to extend them if the season was to go on into, say, July or August. Yeah,
not yet. I mean, it's obviously one of the things on a very long list of things to do. And, that list seems to be growing by the day, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I think we've got to look at all of those different scenarios. And we're fortunate in that we've got very few players whose contracts expire on the 30th of June. So I know a lot of other clubs have probably got many other players in that position. But yeah, it's on the to-do list. It will come round for Dan and Graham to talk about with us, if and when we get to that position.
And I know yourself and Tony spoke last week about wanting to have as much clarity as you can on this Premier League season, next Premier League season. When do you think we'll be in a position where there is a cut-off point for when this season has to end and when the next season has to begin?
It's a really tough question, James. I mean, it's something which I think all of us are playing over in our minds. And just when you think, well, it must be that day, then, there might be another government announcement that pushes that back or brings it forward or whatever. The reality is we don't know right now. I think, all 20 clubs in the Premier League are still focused as best they can be on completing this season, provided it's safe and provided it doesn't have a material impact on next season. As I've said in a couple of interviews this week, there will come a point when we're going to have to look at where that line in the sand is. I don't know where that line is yet or when that decision has to be reached. But for now, we're still focused, and we will just simply follow whatever the government guidelines are at the time.
It's just a question for both of you. I'll start with you, Paul. Again, it just goes back to what the Chief Medical Officer was saying yesterday about social distancing and the need to keep that in place for at least the rest of this year. Do you have any thoughts about the prospects of football being played behind closed doors for that length of time? I think most people accept the need to finish this season behind closed doors because of the competition integrity issues. But the prospects of maybe the entire first half of next season being behind closed doors. I mean, what do you think about that possibility?
Well, I think we're still digesting it, Ben. I mean, I heard it like everyone else last night, and I must admit I was quite shocked to hear it. I wasn't totally surprised, given the sad death toll that we're seeing on a daily basis, that it would go on beyond the summer. But to the end of the year, at least, I think was what he said, was something of a shock. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to play Premier League football behind closed doors. It's going to be very difficult for football clubs right the way through the pyramid to not have the benefit of the matchday income that we all rely on. And the lower down the pyramid you go, where the broadcast income is less significant, the matchday income by definition is more significant. So I must admit, it concerns me hugely for football as a whole, for the industry as a whole. I think it will, put many clubs in a very, very difficult financial position. But it's something, by the sounds of it, we are going to have to find a way of adapting to, not just commercially, but also from a sporting point of view as well. The players are going to have to get used to it. But again, every week that goes by, every month that goes by, we get more information and we process that information. We start to adapt to the new environment that we're facing. And I dare say that once again, we will process this information and start to think about our plans and how we adapt to it.
People say that football is nothing without the fans. How long could we continue to play behind closed doors before we have to say we can't play behind closed doors? And after a certain point, when is it reasonable to do a whole first half of a season behind closed doors?
Again, I think it comes back down to people's health and safety, and if there's a prospect that by not playing behind closed doors we're compromising that, then we simply have to get used to it and have to deal with it. And we've already had getting on for 20,000 people losing their lives through this virus, and we've got to do whatever we can to stop the spread and to bring these numbers down as quickly as we can. Now, clearly, in the absence of a vaccine, in the absence of something that's going to help reduce that overnight, then we've got to follow whatever the medics and the scientists are saying it's the best thing to do. And it's not just the sports industry, it's going to be cinemas, it's going to be restaurants, it's going to be bars, and it's going to be a very different way of life by the sounds of it for many months to come. It's one thing adapting to it during this period of lockdown. Over the last few weeks, it's been a novel experience for many and a difficult experience for many more. But for that to continue over many months is a very different thing. And I think that's going to take some processing.
And Graham, what are your thoughts on what the Chief Medical Officer had to say yesterday and the potential implications for that?
Yeah, again, I echo a lot of what Paul said and a bit shocked. Even though I know we're talking about behind closed doors, but on a football pitch, it's very difficult to socially distance. So there's implications there in terms of how they see how they see footballers really. So that's something we have to overcome as well. But it's echoing what Paul said. It's challenging times, very, very serious times with the amount of lives being lost and businesses being affected. So we have to just try our best to do what we can to make the situation as good as it can be.
Now, Graham, there seems to be a plan that not just in England but elsewhere, that testing players, routinely will allow them to get back to playing. Do you think players will sort of accept that as long as they're tested regularly, that they'll be happy to play and play a contact sport in particular?
Yeah, I think people are looking what's happening in other countries and thinking that it can just be transferred across to here. We're in a situation far behind a lot of other countries when it comes to testing. So I think footballers and the footballers that I know wouldn't be comfortable if they're getting tested and key workers, frontline people in the NHS aren't getting, the adequate testing. That would be very. It's not the kind of people that they are as that I know. But of course, if we get to the point where we can test the nation, we can test people that need it more so than footballers, and we get to that point, then I'm sure footballers will be happy with that, but not until it's the right thing to do for the country and for the overall health of the country.
In terms of the causes for the new campaign, have you decided what they are, and is that decision already been made? Who you're going to sort of back, which charities?
No, not yet. That's going to be something that the players and the staff will work together on. So, we've been contacted over this period by quite a few local charities and causes looking for help. And what we'll do is we'll try and reduce that down to a number that the players and staff can then decide amongst themselves, which ones they want to support with the funds they raise. So that's something a bit down the track. We're going to let the pool of money raised build up a little bit first, and then we'll start to get that money out for those causes when they most need it, which clearly is very soon.
And in terms of the AMEX itself, you're already supporting the NHS with a testing centre. How's that going, and is it working smoothly?
Very good. I was there on Saturday, which was the day we opened, and was taken through the drive-through process myself, which was fascinating to see how much detail goes into these tests and how complex it is actually to make sure that you follow the procedures that are set out and get the test done correctly so that it can then be sent off and you get a result quickly. It's very easy to miss one step in the process and to get that wrong. So to some extent, I can understand why it's taken a bit of time to get some of these facilities up and running, because it's not a simple process as it stands. And we've got two facilities there. We've got a drive-through facility, which I experienced. I didn't do the test, obviously, but I went through the whole process. And we've also got an assisted test facility there for people that are not well enough to test themselves or are not able to test themselves. And we can actually support them there with that test as well. So, they've already got up to many hundreds of people being tested a day at the site, which is incredible when you consider we only opened on Saturday afternoon. And the staff there are incredibly professional and resilient. They've just simply got on with it. The suppliers that the government had organised to build the facility were incredible. Deloitte, who are the company overseeing it, have been incredibly clever with their organisation and their logistics planning. And Sodexo, who are running the site on behalf of the government and Deloitte, are our own partners at the stadium. So they're very familiar with the site. They understand it. We've also got some of our club staff that are helping. And just today, actually, we agreed with Bill Collison, who's one of the shareholders of the Ivy in Brighton, and also Bill's Restaurants. It's his restaurant chain that Paul mentioned earlier. And they're going to be feeding the staff on the site at least one day a week so they can give them a really good meal to thank them for everything that they're doing. And again, it's an incredibly kind gesture from local business people who simply want to play their part in helping through the crisis. So, the whole thing has been an incredible amount of teamwork and spirit to get it up and running so quickly and to get it working for NHS frontline workers so quickly. So it's just great that we've got that in our area now, and all of the people at Royal Sussex Hospital and all the NHS trusts around this area can now have their staff tested on a regular basis as and when they need it, and hopefully if they're negative, get them back onto the front line to do the great job that they're doing.
And do you know how long it's going to be there, or is that those sort of discussions going on?
For as long as it's needed. I mean, we're not charging for the facility. It's our sort of gift, if you like, to try and help through this crisis. And as far as we're concerned, it can stay for as long as it's needed.
Ben was talking a little bit about other countries. I know you can't compare other countries, but you must have been monitoring the situation in Germany, who are a bit further down the line, back into training. They're in the planning process in terms of getting games maybe underway, maybe in the next couple of months. Is that encouraging? And what have you made of what's happening over there?
Well, again, it's so difficult because one minute I'm hearing, the players are back in training, and then this morning I think I saw comments from Angela Merkel saying that she thinks maybe they're going too fast in relaxing some of the social distancing rules. So I think, like here, each day seems to bring about new information, which maybe changes your opinion on how long this is going to take and when you can start to get back to some degree of normality. But as I've said several times on this call so far, I think we have to follow the government's guidelines. I know the Premier League are very, very keen to make sure that, they don't put any more pressure on the government or any more pressure on the NHS at a time when neither party or organisation really needs additional pressure. It's difficult enough. But at the same time, we all know that we would love to be able to play football again soon, because it might give the country a little bit of a lift when the time was right. But we can only do it when it's safe to do so, Johnny. And we can't put, as Graham said, the players at any greater risk than any other person in this country. That wouldn't be fair or right. So we've got to make sure that all of the environmental factors are correct before we push that button.
Thanks, Paul. Graham, just on the Albion as One campaign, it came from the players, which is great to see, I imagine, for you as a head coach. A couple of local boys have been very involved, Lewis Dunk and Glenn Murray, who sort of made Brighton his home over a couple of spells. What do you make of their involvement? And is it useful having a couple of guys that maybe get the area in terms of as part of your playing squad?
Yeah, I think so. I think it does help. Both of those guys, Glenn and Lewis, understand the club, understand the position of the club in the community. They understand the values of the club, so they're more able to help. They're more able to get behind the club in times of trouble. Because the opposite to that is there's a bit of a disconnect, and it's very much an employee relationship, whereas I think there's a genuine feeling with those guys to the club, and also with the squad of players. Like I said, I think to echo what Paul has said, speaking with Glenn and speaking with Lewis, they're really positive. They're really confident that the guys have an understanding of what they need to do and their responsibility in the community and towards the club. So we're quite fortunate to have those two leading it, but also a good group of players.
You mentioned you've been watching, going back over old games. Has this time allowed you to maybe have a little bit more of a look at those loan players? You mentioned about Ben White, the likes of Matt Clark, Christian Walton as well, and how they might be formulated into your plans going forward. Have you been able to sort of see a little bit more of those?
Yeah, we have, and we've been discussing them and what the potential options could be. But you're right, yeah, just to speak with David Weir, who's our loans manager, and get some more information, some more feedback, put them all into the mix in terms of, like I said before, the knowledge of the club, where it's at, what a playing squad have been up to, what the experiences were for people last year, and trying to predict, okay, how can that affect us next year, whenever that is.
And just finally for me, in terms of your little group management team, Billy and Bjarne, how are they, and how pleased you with the way that they've seamlessly worked into the club in your first season, but how are they getting on and managing this process?
They've been good. Obviously, I know them well because I've worked with them for a long time, but I think it's more a testament to the club and the people at the club and initially and existingly that have made us so welcome, that have made that transition period, if you like, into another club so easy for us. Everybody's been very supportive, been very helpful. But no, they're going about their work. It's not so easy for Billy on the Zoom, but he's getting there, and we're managing.
He's probably not used to the sunshine either. Thanks very much, guys.